Now, welcome to a new video. First of all, I really apologize for all the background noise, but there's this celebration going on this weekend where I live, and there's just constant noise. Now, the first book I want to speak about is this one, which is The Trouble with Happiness by Tove Ditlevsen. Now, I've read the really famous trilogy by her in September, which is called Childhood, Youth, Dependency, and I absolutely just fell in love with all her writing, and she really reminded me in a way of Sylvia Plath, which is very unusual because I think that Sylvia Plath has such a distinct voice, but I think from all the authors I've read so far, she reminds me the most of Sylvia Plath. And this is a collection of short stories, which I have not finished yet. I have not read all of them, but these are just so soul-crushing and soul-shattering. I think I've never read anything quite like this, and it's so astonishing how she came up with all these stories that are different but also similar in a way, and it's so amazing how she has such a deep understanding of the human condition and of human life and of sadness and isolation. And I think what all these stories have in common is that you don't exactly know what is about to happen or what is about to unfold when you start reading one of the short stories. The way that it's written, it sort of forces you to understand the characters and the relations between all the characters as you read, which means that you don't know exactly what is about to happen from the beginning. And so at first you're kind of unsure what's actually going on, but as you keep reading and as you slowly understand what is about to happen or what the story is actually about, what the core of the story is, it hits you so deeply, and it made me so sad. I think the underlying theme of all these stories are communication issues and how people, whether that's couples that are married or even families or just humans between each other, how they do not state the obvious, even though maybe they all know what's going on. Maybe only out of 4 characters there are only 3 characters who know what's going on, and there's one character, one story for instance, that was the child and did not know what's going on, but all the other characters know what's going on. And so there's, I wouldn't even just call it communication, but just information and how you stay silent on certain things, and how that really shapes the relationships you have with the people around you, and how it sort of eats you alive almost. And I found that just so deeply tragic, and honestly all of these stories I think are so beautiful, and I think they're perfect for the winter because you don't have to read a whole novel. You can just read 1 or 2 stories at a time, and yeah, I think this is just astonishing, honestly. Next, I want to talk about the unabridged journals of Sylvia Plath. Now, as you can see, this is quite big and I have not finished it yet. I started to read this in September as well, and I think because this is obviously her journals, it's not like a novel that you can, or that you would want to read in one sitting. I really want to take my time with this and read different passages over a period of time, because I'm so in love with Sylvia Plath and I really rediscovered all of her work this year. And obviously because she died at such a young age, there's not that much material from her to read. There are lots of poems. She wrote so much poetry, so in a way there is material, but she only published one novel. I believe there are a few short stories, so it's not like she has 20 novels that you could read. So I just want to read as much of her as I can, which is why I wanted to read her diaries, and also because The Bell Jar, her novel, is obviously quite autobiographical, so I wanted to see how much of the novel was brought in from her real life, or just basically how it influenced the book, and to see the parallels. But overall, I think what I found with this is, because this was written in the 1950s, in the early 1950s, and it's so, in a way, comforting to see, because even though there were some societal changes, I think that the overall feelings and worries of young women sort of stayed the same. The journals, they start when she goes to college, so she is 19 at the time, I believe, when the journals start, and you can just see this worry about, not just about academic performance, but more so about friendship and about love, and she worries about the future and all of her ambitions as an author and as a poet, and how she sort of can't combine her aspirations of having a career and being a successful woman, which is what she wants, how she can combine that with the role that in a way is expected of her, but also in a way that she wants, which is the role of having a husband and being married and having children. And she worries so much about how if she gets married, if she is able to continue to write. And I just find that so fascinating and comforting in a way, because all of these worries that she has about friendship and love and finding love, I think, and also about career, I think for me, even though I'm not 19, I'm a bit older than her, but all of these things, they have sort of stayed the same, and I often worry about the exact same things that she worries about in this book, and I just find that so comforting, and I don't know, it's like a hug from a friend, and I'm really grateful for this. Next, I wanted to talk about Plath's poetry. This is a collection of all her poems, and it contains the poetry from the collection Ariel, as well as a collection called, Selected Poems. And I have read both of these, so there's going to be some overlap. But this also contains some previously unpublished poems from her early life, especially, I believe, so you can see her early work in this. And the poems are ordered chronologically, which is really nice, because that sort of allows you to follow the evolution of her poetry and of her work. And there are also short introductions for between each part of the book, which is really, really nice. And I mean, if you love Sylvia Plath, I would just really recommend this, because this contains all of the poetry, and I could tell you some of my favorites. I think one of my favorite poems of all time by her is called The Moon and the Yeehaw Tree. There's also one called Mirror, or Mirrors, and there's one called The Babysitters. And I believe that all of these were published in 1961. I believe that The Moon and the Yeehaw Tree and The Babysitters you can also find in Ariel and in the Selected Poetry collection, which those are, obviously this is quite big, and those other two, they are a bit shorter. They're not really, I think they have like 80 pages. But yeah, if you love Sylvia Plath, I would honestly recommend this. This would also be really great as a Christmas gift. If you know someone who loves Sylvia Plath, buy this for them. Next, I want to talk about this poetry collection, which is by Wendy Cope. And this contains a really famous poem, which is called The Oranges, and which honestly breaks my heart. And it also contains, which I think is one of my favorite poems of all time, which is called After the Lunch. I actually saw that poem a while ago on Instagram, and I was so obsessed with it that I was convinced that I had to read all of Wendy Cope's work. Now obviously this is not all of it, but it's at least a start, and I would really recommend this poetry collection. You could read this in one evening, in one sitting. Now I would say that I was not obsessed with every single poem in this collection. I think because I've been reading so much Sylvia Plath poetry, my standards are just extremely high. But this, I mean, it's still really good. It genuinely is still really good. So I would still recommend this to anyone who likes poetry. I can tell you some of my favorites. Apart from the oranges and After the Lunch, I think there's a poem in here which is called Valentine, which I really loved. One called As Sweet. There's also one called I Worry, which I really liked. Such beautiful titles. And lastly, I want to talk about the letters that Kafka sent to Milena, and I've seen passages of this all over the place, and so I was just convinced that I had to read this, also because I want to read more of Kafka's work. Basically, I want to read everything by him because I find him really fascinating and I really relate to him a lot from what I've seen. Basically, Kafka, he met Milena in Vienna, I believe, and at the time she was actually married, and I think they only saw each other in person for a few days, but that had such a big impact on them that they kept sending each other these letters. And I think especially Kafka, he was so enamored with her because she was really this very strong and bright, intelligent woman. I think she was a Leo, if you believe in astrology, and I think that he was just really drawn to her, and I think you can really tell that in his letters. And actually it says in the back, the voice of Kafka in letters to Milena is more personal, more pure and more painful than in his fiction, a testimony to human existence and to our eternal wait for the impossible. This is a marvelous new edition of a classic text. And honestly, I agree. I really just agree, and I think especially if you're interested in Kafka, and also if you're interested in letters in general, I think I've been really drawn to reading diaries by people and letters because that gives you more of a personal view to the author and you understand them more on a personal level. So if you are that sort of person, I would really recommend this. And I actually really want to make a video about journals and letters of different authors because I just find that fascinating. I don't know. Lastly, I really just quickly want to talk about this, which is something that I already spoke about in a previous video. But this is actually diary entries from Annie Arnaud, my dear love. And I think this is really perfect, and I'm just still so obsessed with it, even though I read it a few months ago. But these are her diary entries from a time where she had a romantic affair with a Russian man who was married at the time. And this is just about obsession, longing, about desire, and just about being so drawn to someone. It's sort of it kind of starts to eat you alive and sort of to destroy you, and basically it's about how you find yourself after a really intense relationship ends. And so if you recently have gone through a difficult time, I think this is honestly perfect because it's so comforting and you feel so understood. It's about heartbreak and about desire and just about all of these things that I think we all deal with. And usually in her novels, in her books, Annie Ernaux takes to write from a very from a, I would say, especially in her later work, she writes from a more distant perspective, and this is really just so intimate and so personal, and you feel so close to her. So I think this is why this is just really special, and I think it can be really comforting to read this, especially over the winter time. Honestly, I read this in October, and I kind of want to reread it actually, but we will see about that. These are all the books. So I hope that this was helpful and that you might have found a book to read for yourself. And let me know what you're reading at the moment. I hope you're all doing well, and once again, thank you for all the love and the support and all the comments. And yeah, I'm really thankful that all of you are here, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I will speak to you soon. Bye!